Hello everyone, and welcome to the channel. In this video, I'm going to explain how to do 55 HP or low HP farming, which is a fairly common method to do farming in Guild Wars 1. I've referenced this method a lot in my videos in the past, however I never really went into the details and specifics on how to use it, so I wanted to remedy that with this video explaining everything that you'll need to know about 55 HP farming. So without further ado, let's get into it. Okay, let's start off by talking about the equipment. As you may have guessed based on the name, you will need 55 HP in order to do this method properly with minor exceptions. Now most professions have a base HP stat of 480 health, the only exception being the Dervish, which has a chest armor piece that inherently adds 25 HP. Therefore, it's impossible to get exactly 55 HP on a Dervish, but it's not a big deal in most cases. Anyway, the only way to reduce the total amount of health we have on our characters is to add superior armor runes to each one of the armor pieces. Each superior rune that you add will reduce your total HP by 75. I would highly recommend putting a superior armor rune for each one of your profession's attributes onto a different armor piece, just so you could get that +3 attribute points for each attribute on that character to help out with whatever farm that you're doing. And of course, your headset will also vary depending on whatever attribute points you need for a particular farm. Now, if you've done the math already, you'll know that 480 minus 75 times the 5 armor pieces will leave you with 105 HP. The remaining 50 HP comes from the next piece of equipment that you will need, and that is the minus 50 HP Deadly Cesta, sometimes referred to as the Deadly Cesta. This is a very specific item that is a reward from the quest Cities of Ascalon, which is for Prophecy's characters only. It is unique and that is the only offhand item in the game that can reduce your base HP by 50. Now, if you don't have access to this quest, or you've accidentally already completed it and gotten rid of the item, whatever it is, it's usually commonly sold in Commodon from other players. I'm not really sure what the going rate is though, but you may need to pay a hefty fee. I think I paid 15 or 20 ecto for the last one I bought, so I'm not sure what the going rate is. That being said, the minus 50 Deadly Cesta is not always required for these low HP farms, but because of it, that's how we get the namesake for this method. So before we move on to the skills, we will need to talk about the weapon slot real quick. Just a little bit of a spoiler, we'll be using a lot of enchantments, therefore you will need a single-handed weapon such as a sword, axe, or a spear with a plus 20% enchantment mod. This will increase the time your enchantments will last by 20%, which is definitely required to make this work, and you'll see why in a bit. But anyway, now onto the skills. The core of the 55 HP farming method lies around 4 skills: Protective Spirit, Shielding Hands, Shield of Absorption, and Balthazar's Spirit. Then usually there's 1 or 2 other survival skills thrown in there with another 2 to 4 skills that inflict damage, depending on whatever farm you're doing. But for the most part, we're just going to be talking about these base skills for this video. The first is Protective Spirit. This is an enchantment spell that when casted on yourself, you won't take any damage more than 10% of your maximum health from a single attack or spell. Therefore, when you get hit by an attack and you have 55 HP, you will only lose 5 HP, meaning that you will have to be hit 11 times before your health goes to 0. So in order not to lose health, we have to use Shielding Hands and Shield of Absorption. They have very similar effects, but the main difference is in casting time and the total enchantment time, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. But anyway, while you have Shielding Hands cast on yourself, it will reduce the total amount of damage you receive by 15. And when you have Shield of Absorption up on yourself, your damage is reduced by 5 each time you get hit with an attack. When used concurrently right after one another, you should be taking 0 damage with each concurrent attack because your total damage is capped at that 10% with Protective Spirit. Now, the important thing here is enchantment time and recharge time between these 2 skills. With your enchanting weapon equipped, Shielding Hand should last for 9.6 seconds and Shield of Absorption should last for 7.2 seconds, totaling for 16.8 seconds if you were to cast one after the other, just like a computer with no time in between. If you've noticed, Shielding Hands has a recharge time of 15 seconds and Shield of Absorption has 10 seconds. Therefore, Shielding Hands will be your limiting factor, meaning that you will have to time your casting so that as soon as one enchantment ends, you will be able to cast the other with only a 1.8 second window. You'll also have to factor in that Shielding Hands has a casting time of only a quarter of a second, so basically instantly, but Shield of Absorption has a casting time of 1 second. So you would basically need to start casting Shielding Hands in that 1.8 second window and make sure it is fully up within that window. Otherwise, you'll start taking damage, and like I said before, you can only survive 11 hits. So depending on how many enemies you are engaged with at once, you could die pretty quickly. I will admit it does take some getting used to this whole process, and you're not going to get it exactly every time. But like I said, you can tank a little bit, but the point being, it's going to take some practice. The last skill is Balthazar's Spirit, and this one is easy to explain because you only have to cast it once. Just cast it on yourself before attacking a group of enemies, and while enchanted, for each hit that you take, you will gain 1 energy point. So as long as you're engaged with some enemies, you should never run out of energy, and it gives you one less thing to worry about. Okay, now on to an example. So I'm using a Necromancer here, and I'm going to be playing around with these Jade Knights just up ahead. And as you can see, I have a superior rune on each one of my armor pieces, so I get very low health. And I'm also holding this axe with the enchanting mod on it. And I also have the minus 50 HP Deadly Cesta, so I get a total of 55 HP. To start, just target yourself and cast Balthazar's Spirit on yourself. And before running in, make sure you have at least Protective Spirit up to limit your damage. And as you can see with each attack that I take, I'm only taking 5 damage up until I cast Shielding Hands, and my damage input goes down to 0, and I'm only getting that 1 tick of energy because of Balthazar's Spirit. Now there's a little bit of a pattern to this, so as soon as Shielding Hands is about to expire and the icon starts to blink, cast Shield of Absorption, and when Shield of Absorption is about to expire and the icon starts to blink, cast Protective Spirit first before casting Shielding Hands. You want to make sure that you always cast Protective Spirit first before every cast of Shielding Hands, and then Shield of Absorption, and follow this pattern. Otherwise, you will run into a timing and coverage issue with your enchantments. If you were to use Protective Spirit, then Shield of Absorption, then Shielding Hands, you can run into an issue where you will start to take damage because you could have a Shielding Hands enchantment under a Protective Spirit enchantment, meaning the damage you would take would go through the Shielding Hands first before Protective Spirit. It also just so happens that Protective Spirit, then Shielding Hands, then Shield of Absorption just works out better with casting times, in my opinion, in that order. But anyway, as long as you're maintaining this pattern, you shouldn't run into any issues unless you forget an enchantment or miss your timing like I did on purpose here. And as you can see, you can die really quickly. And this is only with 3 enemies attacking me, so you can imagine how fast you can die with a large group of enemies. So that was just with any profession other than the monk, and if you are playing a monk, you've got it easy. You don't even have to bring Shielding Hands. Instead, just bring Blessed Aura, which depending on your attribute points will increase the time your enchantments will last by up to 37%, and you'll even be able to increase the enchanting duration of Shield of Absorption up to 7 seconds instead of 6. That is because you can play around with the Protection Prayers and Divine Favor headpieces and runes to better optimize your monk attribute points. So in total, with these changes, Shield of Absorption should last for up to 11.5 seconds, meaning that as soon as the skill is recharged, you can recast it immediately, and you should have no downtime in between casts. Just make sure to recast Protective Spirit before each Shield of Absorption just like before, and you shouldn't run into any trouble. Now, these examples so far have only shown where enemies deal simple melee or attack damage. Oftentimes, there's enemies whose attacks will cause some sort of health degradation, such as poison or bleeding damage. In these cases, it's pretty common to bring skills such as Healing Breeze or Feel No Pain in order to counter them. The only difference here is that you just have to manage your timing with your casting of Shielding Hands and Shield of Absorption with these other survival skills. But one thing to mention about these health regeneration skills is that they work a lot better when your health is lower, because with Protective Spirit up, your damage is limited to 10% of your total health, but your health regeneration and degradation are constant. The most health that you could regain is 20 HP per second with the plus 10 ticks or minus 10 ticks. So long as you're not getting hit more than 4 times a second, you could theoretically survive with just Protective Spirit and health regeneration skills, just like this Molotov Rocktail example. But this only works when your health is at 55 HP or lower. These farming methods get much more difficult the more HP you have. In other words, the Deadly Cesta is almost always required for these kind of farms. But this Molotov Rocktail example also leads us into the next thing that you could run into, and that is Interrupt. Unfortunately, there are not many ways to avoid interruption except with Mesmer skills and maintaining the skill called Mantra of Resolve. Another common mechanic you might run into is Knockdown, and this can be dealt with by bringing along I Am Unstoppable or Balanced Stance. I Am Unstoppable is the more common of the two, but in cases like the Halcyon Job farm, you will need to bring both of these skills, and you'll have to cycle between both so that you have constant anti-knockdown. I Am Unstoppable is also good for avoiding being crippled and slowing you down while running around. So as you may have guessed, low HP farming is not invincible. There are a few mechanics that these builds cannot handle. Some examples are some farms where enemies will use spells that rip enchantments or can deplete your energy. There are ways to handle this though, but that's a topic of discussion for a whole other video. There's also farming locations that would require you to combine multiple of these battle mechanics to survive, and that makes this tactic very difficult for some farms. That being said, there are usually other farming methods that can deal with these though. Now, practically everything that's been talked about in this video has been in regards to surviving a farm. And with the skills and tactics mentioned, you should have 2 or 3, maybe 4 skill slots available for spells that deal damage to do farming. And those can vary greatly depending on whatever you're trying to farm. 55 HP farming, or low HP farming, is very versatile in that it opens up a lot of farming possibilities throughout all of the game, throughout all the campaigns, and all of Guild Wars 1. Many of which would be impossible to do without these tactics, so hopefully everything we've talked about in this video has not scared you away from trying low HP farming. Yes, it does take some getting used to, but once you get the hang of it, you are able to do so much more in this game and get a better appreciation for how complex some of the mechanics and the gameplay can be. So that's all I have for this video. I just want to say thank you so much for watching, especially if you made it all the way through. I know I talked a lot in this one, but if you liked it, please leave a like down below. It really does help out the channel, especially if you want to see something like this again. I do plan on making a few more videos like these for some various tactics and whatnot. But anyway, I'll leave you off like I always do. Good luck, have fun, and again, thanks for watching.